3 jobs. No rest. That was my rhythm, my routine, my prison. Wake up at 4:30 a.m., lace up steel-toed boots, and clock in at the factory by 6. 10 hours of heat, grease, and back-breaking repetition. After that, a rushed sandwich in the truck and straight to HVAC jobs. Repair calls in neighborhoods I'd never afford to live in. Nights were for deliveries, Uber Eats, groceries, whatever paid. I'd drive until my eyes blurred and the world turned into nothing but brake lights and fast food bags. Then I'd crawl into bed around 2 a.m., sleep in fits, and do it all over again. All for love. Tessa was my wife. Still is, technically. We met back when she was working part-time at a bookstore and studying for her master's in clinical psychology. I was fixing an air conditioner in the same building. She had this way of talking that made you feel like you mattered, even if you were covered in grime and tired as hell. She told me once, "You make hard things look easy." I carried that line with me, like a vow. When she told me she had $61,000 in student loans, I didn't flinch. I said, "We'll take care of it." She cried that night, held my face in her hands, and whispered, "I can't believe you chose me." And that was it. That was enough fuel to drive me for 3 years straight. Every shift, every scalded hand and missed meal, every damn minute was powered by that memory of her trembling smile. Friends thought I was out of my mind. "You're killing yourself for what? Degrees and dreams that aren't even yours," they'd ask. But they didn't get it. I wasn't paying for a diploma. I was investing in a life together. In the woman who swore she'd use that degree to help others, to build a better world. And I believed her. I needed to believe her. Because when you're half awake at a stoplight, trying to remember which job you're driving to, belief is all you've got. The factory was hell. Loud. Hot. Endless. I watched guys twice my age break down on the floor, clinging to their knees or backs like the pain owed them something. But I kept going. HVAC wasn't much better. Crawling under buildings, lifting units the size of bathtubs, inhaling dust that stuck to your lungs like glue. The delivery job? That was where I truly broke. Not from the work, but from the silence. Miles and miles of quiet. Me alone with my thoughts and the creeping realization that I didn't know what day it was anymore. Tessa tried to keep me grounded. In the beginning, at least. She'd leave notes in my lunch bag. "You're my hero. Almost there. Let's go to the beach after the last payment." I kept every single one of them in my glove compartment like a poor man's treasure chest. Sometimes, when my legs screamed at me or I caught myself falling asleep behind the wheel, I'd pull out a note and read it aloud like a prayer. But as the years wore on, something shifted. Tessa got her degree. She got a job, then a better one. Her wardrobe changed. Her friends changed. I started noticing she no longer asked about my shifts. She stopped leaving notes. Stopped checking if I ate. When I'd stumble in late at night, she'd already be asleep, her back to me, her phone lighting up the pillow. I told myself it was just a phase. That once the debt was gone, once we could breathe again, things would go back to the way they were. So I pushed harder, worked longer. When the final payment loomed, I could feel freedom at my fingertips. I imagined surprising her, setting the loan statement on the table, saying it's done, with a grin so big it cracked my face open. I thought she'd cry, jump into my arms. I even thought of planning a weekend trip. Just us. No clocks. No deliveries. Just sleep and sun. What a fool I was. Because none of it, the blisters, the fatigue, the stolen time, none of it prepared me for what would come next. But I'll never forget the final day of debt. I came home filthy from the factory, hands stained with grease, and I tossed my boots off at the door like I was shedding the last layer of a life I never wanted to live again. I cracked my neck, stretched my sore shoulders, and felt a surge of relief I hadn't tasted in years. I'd done it. I kept my promise. For love. For us. And I believed, in that fragile, fleeting moment, that it all meant something. I didn't know it then, but that would be the last peaceful breath I'd take for a long time. It was a quiet Sunday dinner, roast chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, and a bottle of red we'd been saving since last fall. I even lit candles. Not for romance, exactly, but for symbolism. I was marking the moment. The end of a chapter. I just submitted the final payment on Tessa's student loan that morning. $61,000. Gone. Paid in full. 3 years of sweat, missed birthdays, skipped vacations, all buried under that one transaction. She sat across from me in her soft beige sweater, scrolling her phone like we weren't celebrating a damn victory. I cleared my throat. "It's done?" I said, trying not to grin too hard. I paid it off. The loan. Tessa looked up slowly, blinking like she hadn't heard me right. The student loan, I repeated, my heart beating faster than it should have. It's over. Completely. I made the last payment this morning. I waited. For tears. A smile. Maybe even a thank you. Something. She took a sip of her wine, tilted her head slightly. That's good, she said flatly. Just, that's good. I stared at her, stunned into silence for a second. That's it. She set her glass down, folded her hands, and looked at me like I was a waiter who brought her the wrong entree. If you really loved me, she said calmly, you'd pay off Maya's loans too. At first, I thought she was joking. I chuckled under my breath, shaking my head. You're funny. But she didn't laugh. She didn't even blink. She leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice low and sharp. No, I'm serious, Malik. She's drowning. She helped raise me, and she's trying to build her own life now. If you love me, if you truly love me, you'll help her. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Tessa, I just spent 3 years working myself to the bone to pay your debt. Mine too. I haven't slept more than 5 hours a night in over 1,000 days. And you want me to start over again for your sister? She didn't flinch. Yes. A beat of silence. My hand lowered. Are you listening to yourself? Tessa leaned back, arms crossed now, her voice suddenly cold. It's not about the money, Malik. It's about what it means. Family takes care of family. Maya's all I've got. And if you cared about me, really cared, you'd understand that. My mind went blank for a second. I couldn't even feel the food in my mouth anymore. I looked at the candle flickering between us, that little symbol of warmth I'd placed there thinking we were closing one chapter and starting another. Turns out, she was just turning the page to a new list of demands. Let me get this straight, I said slowly. You think love equals financial sacrifice. I think love equals support, she replied, her voice rising slightly. And right now, I need you to support Maya. And if I say no? Tessa didn't hesitate. Then we're done. Just like that. Not even a twitch of guilt on her face. Not a single tear. She said it with the calm finality of someone canceling a gym membership. I pushed my chair back slowly. My hands were steady, but something inside me, something old and weathered, shifted. I'd been over backwards for 3 years, thinking I was building something. A future. A life with someone who'd be there at the finish line, clapping and cheering, grateful. But all I'd done was feed a bottomless pit of expectations. You're really willing to end our marriage over this? I asked, my voice quiet, my stomach tightening. Tessa raised an eyebrow. Don't make it dramatic. It's simple. If you're not going to help the people who matter to me, then maybe we're not aligned. Not aligned. God, the corporate language of it made my skin crawl. I stood up, chest tight with a mixture of disbelief and something else. Not quite anger. Not yet. Just sorrow. Heavy, wordless sorrow. The kind that doesn't show up in screaming matches, but in the quiet realization that the person across from you never saw you at all. I looked down at her one last time. I paid off $61,000, I said quietly. Not because I owed it, but because I loved you. I never asked for a parade. Just respect. Gratitude. A little humanity. She stared at me with unreadable eyes, then picked up her wine again. Don't make me the villain, Malik. You chose to pay it off. That was your decision. I walked to the kitchen, grabbed my coat from the hook. My hands weren't shaking. My mind wasn't racing. I just felt done. Where are you going? She asked casually, like I was headed to the store. Out, I said. To remember who I was before I forgot myself for you. The door closed behind me with a soft click, but in my chest, it slammed like thunder. And that was the night something inside me, something deep, exhausted, and buried under years of sacrifice, clicked. Not broke, not shattered. Clicked, like a key finally turning in a lock. The next morning, I was back on the job. HVAC maintenance, mid-July heat. I was wedged between a clunky air handler and a rusted water tank in someone's attic, sweat dripping from my chin, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a work order update. But no, it was a message from Maya. Thank you so much. You're amazing. It read, punctuated with a trail of glitter emojis, hearts, and her Venmo handle. I blinked. My first reaction wasn't anger, it was confusion. I hadn't told anyone I was going to send her anything. I hadn't agreed to send her anything. So why the thanks? I sat back, mind spinning. The insulation around me itched through my uniform, the heat pressing in like an oven, but I barely noticed it. I stared at the message for a long second before exiting out of it, only to find a second one already queued up. Just let me know what you need from me, bank info, whatever. I'm so grateful, Malik. Seriously, you're saving me. My hands dropped into my lap. Something between a laugh and a groan pushed out of my throat. This wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was preparation. Tessa had already told her, probably while I was still cleaning up after dinner last night. No one had asked if I wanted to do this. No one had even waited for me to process what had just happened. To them, I was a checkbook with legs. Tessa called an hour later while I was tightening a coupling in a crawl space. I declined the first time. Let it ring out. She tried again. I answered, not because I wanted to talk, but because I knew she wouldn't stop until I did. You're being dramatic, she said, skipping any greeting. No, I replied. I'm being quiet. That's different. Look, she sighed. I know you're upset, but this is just one more step. One more favor for the people we care about. One more step. I repeated slowly. Tessa, you don't even realize what you're saying. You're treating what I just did, 3 years of my life, as some kind of warm-up. She huffed, clearly impatient. It's not like that. Then what is it like? I asked. Tell me. Because I haven't had a real weekend in over 1,000 days. I've been eating gas station sandwiches and falling asleep in my car to make sure you could finish your degree. I thought we were in it together. Now you're handing out my wallet like a raffle prize. There was a pause on the other end. You're overreacting. I laughed bitterly. That's what you're going with. Not I'm sorry. Not let's talk. Just you're overreacting? You're twisting this into something it's not, she said, her voice rising. Maya's family. She's my sister. She looked out for me when we had nothing. You don't understand that kind of bond. No, I said softly. I guess I don't understand what it feels like to demand things from people who are barely holding themselves together. The line went silent. I never asked you to take 3 jobs, she muttered after a while. No, but you sure as hell didn't stop me either, I said, already done with the conversation. Don't call me at work again. I ended the call before she could respond. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was angry, though, God knows I was, but because everything felt like it was unraveling too fast for me to catch it. I kept looking at the ceiling, as if some invisible answer might show up in the fan's slow rotation. My thoughts circled like vultures. I kept seeing that text from Maya. The sparkles. The Venmo handle. It wasn't just entitlement, it was expectation. I don't know if Tessa meant to raise her that way or if that whole family had always been like this. But what scared me more than anything was how easy it was for them to act like I owed them. I thought about all the times I'd said yes when I should have said no. The time I missed my best friend's wedding because I couldn't afford to lose the overtime shift. The time I let Tessa use our savings to throw Maya a birthday weekend in Savannah, even though I knew we were behind on rent. The time I skipped Christmas with my own parents because Tessa didn't want to deal with the travel. I thought I was loving her. What I was really doing was disappearing, bit by bit, until there wasn't much of me left. I didn't even notice the moment I stopped being a husband and started being a service. And now here I was, lying next to a woman who thought my exhaustion was currency, who saw my sacrifice not as love, but as leverage. I reached for my phone, scrolled through the messages again. Maya had sent a third one. Don't ghost me, LOL. Tessa said you're just taking time to process. I stared at the text for a long time. Then I opened Venmo, not to send anything, but to block her. Because it wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about me finally choosing not to be used. I woke up the next morning and didn't reach for my work boots. That alone felt like rebellion. For 3 years, my body had moved on autopilot, out of bed, shower, uniform, keys, grind. But today, I sat on the edge of the mattress in the silence and breathed. No alarms. No delivery pings. No factory buzzers. Just me. A man finally listening to the echo in his own mind. I walked into the kitchen, poured black coffee, and opened my laptop. My hand hesitated over the trackpad for a moment, but then I typed in the loan company's name. I still had the confirmation email from the final payment. I pulled it up, staring at the green checkmark like it was laughing at me. Paid in full. A badge of sacrifice. A trophy no one clapped for. Then I dialed. Loanco support. How can I help you? Yes, I said calmly. My name is Malik Rowan. I'm the payer on an account I recently cleared. I need to reverse a payment. Sir, the loan is paid in full, the agent said politely. Are you requesting a refund? That's right, I replied. That last payment hasn't processed through my bank yet. I'd like to stop it and have the amount returned. She put me on hold. I listened to soft piano music while I sipped my coffee, my heart oddly steady. No rage. No panic. Just precision. Like I was unwinding a rope that had been choking me for years. The agent came back. Okay, Mr. Rowan, I've placed a hold. You'll receive a follow-up within 3 business days. I thanked her. Hung up. Then I called the bank. I need to cancel 3 auto-pay setups, I told the representative. And I'd also like to close a joint credit card account. Can I ask why you're closing it? She said. No longer needed, I replied. She gave me a soft, I understand, that made me wonder how many people had called like this, voices calm but hollow, wrapping up the logistics of a love that had rotted beneath the surface. After that, I opened a new account. Solo. Clean. My name, my terms. And then I just sat. Not scrolling. Not planning. Not racing the clock. Just sitting at the kitchen table with the blinds drawn open, the morning sun stretching across the tile like a silent witness. I hadn't felt that kind of stillness in years. It didn't feel empty. It felt like exhaling after holding my breath for far too long. I looked around the apartment, our apartment. Pictures of us on the walls. A wedding photo. A snapshot of us at Myrtle Beach. I stared at one on the fridge, me with my arm around Tessa at her graduation, both of us smiling like we'd made it. I didn't tear it down. I didn't smash anything or scream. I just looked at it and knew. This wasn't mine anymore. Maybe it never had been. I grabbed my laptop again and opened a travel site. I didn't even think about it, really. My fingers just typed the word, Montana. It wasn't random. I'd always dreamed of visiting. Somewhere open. Quiet. No city horns. No blinking apps. Just pine trees and silence. A place big enough to hold whatever pieces I still had left. I booked a one-way ticket. Window seat. Morning flight. No insurance. Then I packed. Not much. Just essentials. My journal, a few clothes, and the small wooden box my father left me before he died. Inside were the letters he'd written to my mother during his deployment, pages worn and folded, held together by rubber bands and memory. I hadn't opened that box in years, but it reminded me that sacrifice, when shared with someone who honors it, becomes something beautiful, not currency. I didn't leave a note. What was there left to say? I'd spoken my truth in sweat, sleepless nights, and overdraft fees. And none of it was heard. The airport was busy when I got there. Families rushing. Businessmen pacing. Teenagers laughing too loudly. I walked through the terminal slowly, like every step was rewiring my muscles to move for me again. My phone buzzed once. Then again. Then 50 times. Calls from Tessa. Text from Maya. A voicemail from Tessa's mom, who hadn't spoken to me since the wedding. Then her dad, who never so much as thanked me for anything. His message just said, Malik, don't be foolish. You're walking away from your responsibilities. Responsibilities. I stood in the security line, letting the noise vibrate in my pocket. Then I powered off the phone. The screen went black, and with it, the grip they all had on me. I boarded my flight when they called my group, sat down, buckled in, and looked out the window as the runway stretched ahead. This wasn't a breakdown. This wasn't abandonment. This was me choosing not to bleed for people who only brought knives. As the plane rose into the clouds, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. By the time I landed in Montana, my phone had been off for 6 hours. I powered it on just long enough to get the rental car from the app, and the second that home screen blinked to life, it was like opening a dam. The notifications flooded in calls, texts, voicemails, too many to count. I didn't open any of them. I just watched the number rise like floodwaters. 34. 62. 89. By the time I reached the hotel parking lot, I was staring at a red badge that read 175 missed calls. The name Tessa dominated the log. Some were spaced minutes apart. Others were back-to-back, like she was dialing in a panic. I scrolled absently. Then came Maya. Then her mom. Then her dad. Names I hadn't seen pop up on my screen in months were suddenly reaching for me like I was oxygen. I leaned against the car for a moment, phone in hand, staring at the snowy mountains in the distance. They were beautiful, untouched, undemanding. I breathed in the cold air, let it fill my lungs, and powered the phone off again. Inside the hotel lobby, the fireplace crackled softly. A bearded man behind the desk handed me my key and offered a tired smile. Long trip. Longer story, I said. The room was small but warm. A king bed with flannel sheets, a window that looked out over a frozen creek, and absolute silence. The kind of quiet that gets into your bones. I dropped my bag, kicked off my boots, and lay back on the bed, fully clothed, arms stretched wide. It took 5 minutes for the buzzing in my head to settle. The tension in my chest had become such a constant companion over the years that I forgot what it felt like to be without it. But here, finally, in this stillness, my body remembered. I wasn't in fight mode. I wasn't bracing for another request or defending a choice. I was just being. A couple hours passed. I dozed, woke, showered, and sat by the window with a cup of tea I'd brewed from the complimentary bags on the nightstand. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't need the noise bleeding back into my peace. But curiosity has a funny way of creeping in, even when you've sworn yourself off the world. I powered the phone on again, just once more, and opened the voicemail tab. The top message was from Tessa, nearly 6 minutes long. Her voice came in shaky. "Malik. I don't even know where to begin," she started. There was a long pause. "I didn't mean for things to go this way. I thought we were building something bigger than just us. I thought helping Maya was part of that. You've always been so strong, so steady, and I guess I started to think you could handle everything. Maybe I was wrong." Another pause. I told myself that asking you to help her wasn't a big deal. But hearing silence on the other end of the table, I knew I pushed too far. I was scared of what that meant, of what I might lose. Her voice cracked then. "You always saved me, Malik. From bills, from bad decisions, from my own fears. And I got used to that. I got comfortable with it. But now you're gone, and I don't know what to do. Please, call me. Let's talk. Don't let this be the end." She ended the call with a sniffle and a soft, desperate, "Please." I listened to the whole thing. Then I hit delete. Not because I hated her. Not because I didn't believe the tears. But because I finally understood that her need didn't make it my responsibility. I stared at the phone screen a moment longer. Another voicemail lit up, but I didn't press play. I placed the phone face down on the desk, stood up, and stretched. They were reacting now, not because they understood, but because they lost control. All this time, I thought love meant staying no matter how tired you got. But maybe love, real love, means someone saying, "Rest. Let me take this burden for a while." I never heard that from Tessa. Never once. Instead, I heard, "Just a little more." And I gave, and gave, until now. I opened the window slightly, letting the cold air brush against my face. The creek down below had frozen mid-flow, like even it had finally paused to catch its breath. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, sat at the desk, and pulled out the notebook I'd brought with me. I flipped to a blank page and wrote, "Day 1, no noise. No guilt. Just breath." I put the pen down and smiled. This wasn't a breakdown. This was my beginning. I didn't hear from Tessa directly for a few days after I settled in Montana. But the world has a way of leaking drama through side channels. On the third morning, while I was nursing a mug of cheap motel coffee and watching frost collect on the window, my Instagram buzzed with a message from Jess, a mutual friend from back when Tessa and I were just a couple of broke kids hanging out at open mic nights. At first, I ignored it. I wanted nothing to do with social media or any digital trace of my old life. But curiosity won, so I opened the app, expecting a simple, "Hey, you all right?" Instead, I found a series of screenshots. Jess had sent them rapid fire, one after the other, each one more surreal than the last. The first was from a group chat, a wall of texts, all about me. Tessa had started the thread. "Malik isn't well," she wrote. "He's having some kind of breakdown. Please give him space, but also reach out if you can." It was like she was holding an intervention for a ghost. Maya's reply came next. "He's just bitter. He finally snapped after I asked for help. Can't believe he'd turn his back on family." A few others chimed in. "Is he okay? He seemed so normal. I never thought he'd bail on Tessa after all that." The conversation spiraled into debate, some of them taking my side, saying Tessa had gone too far, others questioning whether I'd always been unstable and just hit it well. I scrolled through the screenshots, half amused, half angry. It was like reading a group of strangers trying to solve a puzzle they'd never seen the pieces to. Then Jess wrote to me directly, "Hey, not taking sides, but thought you should see what's being said. Also, FYI, Maya told someone she expects you to cover her future rent too. Dodged a bullet, Malik." I set the phone down and laughed, a real, rough laugh that started in my gut and rattled out of my chest. It wasn't bitterness. It was relief. I'd spent so long twisting myself up, trying to please everyone, worrying about what people would think if I ever said no. And here they were, showing their hands, confirming every gut feeling I tried to swallow. The group chat meltdown rolled on. According to Jess's updates, old friends of ours debated my sanity in public, arguing whether love had to look like total self-erasure or if maybe, just maybe, I'd been used for too long. Someone wrote, Malik finally woke up. Good for him. Someone else replied, marriage is about sacrifice, but this is extreme. And then a third voice, Tessa crossed a line. That's not love. I realized, scrolling through the digital wreckage, that nothing I could have done, no explanation, no apology, would have changed the script these people had already written about me. My absence was an inconvenience. My refusal to bankroll their comfort had become an indictment of my character. Tessa spun the story as best she could, painting me as unstable, unpredictable, ungrateful. But not everyone was buying it. A few old friends, people I'd lost touch with, people I thought had forgotten about me, messaged privately. Simple words, but sincere. You good, man? If you need anything, I'm here. Proud of you for standing up for yourself. I replied to a couple, brief and honest. Thanks. I'm good. Just needed to breathe. That night, with the snow falling thick and quiet outside my window, I thought about Jess's last message. Maya expected me to pay her rent next. Maybe her car insurance after that. Maybe a down payment on a house someday. The well was never going to be full enough. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't crazy for finally putting a cap on the bucket. For the first time in years, I felt the world spin without me having to push it. I went outside, boots crunching in the powder, and looked up at a sky full of stars so clean and cold it felt like a rebuke to everything petty and desperate back home. Standing there, I let the anger go. I let the guilt go. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to hold together a life that demanded everything and gave nothing back. Here, under that open sky, I wasn't anyone's savior or scapegoat. I was just Malik, breathing, free. When I got back to my room, there was one more message from Jess. If you ever want to talk, you know where to find me. You're not alone. I turned off my phone, crawled under the blankets, and slept so deeply that I didn't dream. The mirror in the lodge bathroom was small, slightly fogged from the shower steam, and framed in rough pine wood. I stood in front of it that morning, barefoot on cold tile, a towel wrapped around my waist, and for the first time in a long time, I really looked at myself. No uniform. No circles under my eyes deep enough to write in. No vibrating phone demanding my next move. Just me. My beard was a little overgrown, the scar on my shoulder still faintly visible from an old HVAC accident. My eyes weren't tired, they were clear. Curious, even. The last time I'd stared into my own reflection like this, it had been rushed, distracted, checking for shaving nicks before bolting out the door at 5 a.m. But now there was stillness. And in that stillness, I saw a man who finally said no. I stepped back from the mirror and pulled on jeans and a flannel shirt. Outside, snow rested like powdered sugar on the pine trees. I grabbed my journal, my coat, and stepped out into the morning. I found a trail behind the lodge that curved gently into the woods. It wasn't marked, just the suggestion of a path where others had walked before. I followed it. Each step crunched beneath my boots. The cold kissed my face, fresh and bracing. Somewhere in the trees, a bird chirped, and I realized how long it had been since I'd done something without a purpose. Not to clock in, not to impress, not to fix, just to be. I hiked for a while, no destination, no hurry. I found a stump near a frozen creek and sat down, pulled out my journal and started writing. Day 3. The man in the mirror isn't tired anymore. He looks like he just came back from the dead, and maybe, in a way, he has. I paused, looked around, then added. I used to think breaking meant failure, but maybe breaking is just the body's way of cracking open to let the truth out. It was there, on that stump, that I called my brother. I hadn't talked to Darren since my wedding. We were never super close. He stayed in Atlanta, worked in construction, had 2 kids and a wife who baked the best peach cobbler I'd ever tasted. But still, we were blood. And I missed him. I didn't even know if he'd answer. But he did. On the 3rd ring. Hello. It's Malik. Pause. Then, well, damn. I laughed. Yeah, I know. Been a minute. You all right? He asked, instantly serious. I told him everything. No edits. No trying to make myself look noble or her look worse. Just the truth. The 3 years. The debts. The dinner. The Venmo text. The flight. He listened without interrupting. And when I finally ran out of words, he said something that stuck. "It's about damn time." I chuckled. "What is?" "You stopped giving people receipts for your love," he said. "That's not love, bro. That's a transaction." We talked for an hour. About the old neighborhood. About his kids. About how he'd seen the wedding photos online and knew I looked worn out even when you were smiling. I hadn't realized how much I needed that voice. That tethered to someone who remembered who I was before I got lost trying to be everything to someone else. When we hung up, he said, "Come visit when you're ready. We'll grill. No expectations. Just family." I pocketed the phone and stared at the trees for a while. The wind had picked up slightly, rustling the branches like a whisper. For years, I lived with a woman who thought my silence was agreement, who saw my labor as her birthright, who used the word love like a lever. But out here, with frost clinging to the needles and no voices in my head except my own, I remembered something important. I have value outside of usefulness. I am not a walking solution. I am not a bottomless well. I am a man. I walked back slowly to the lodge, the kind of walk that feels like it leaves pieces of the past behind with each footstep. By the time I returned, my boots were wet, my fingers numb, but my chest felt lighter. Back in the room, I stripped off the cold layers, made tea, and sat by the fire. I opened the journal again. Day 3 continued. Called Darren. Cried a little when he said, "I miss you." I hadn't realized how long it had been since someone missed me for me, not for what I could give. I set the pen down and leaned back. No deadlines. No damage control. Just me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel empty. I felt full. And not with guilt, but with peace. I hadn't turned my phone on in days. Not for news, not for apps, not even to check the time. It sat face down on the small wooden desk beside the bed, silent and irrelevant. Out here, I measured time in the way the sun hit the snow, the hush that settled over the trees at dusk, and the way my breath came slower, deeper, less burdened by everything I used to carry. But something about that morning tugged at me. A nudge in my gut. Like closure was tapping on the glass, and I needed to look. So I powered the phone on. It took a minute to catch up. Ping after ping. Notifications loading like a machine coming out of a coma. I didn't scroll through them. I didn't open messages. I went straight to voicemail. And there it was. A new message from Tessa. 7 minutes long. I stared at it for a while, thumb hovering above the play button. I could have deleted it unread, like the others. I could have pretended it never existed. But some part of me, maybe the part that still wanted to understand how it all broke, pressed play. Her voice came through immediately, raw and cracked like a mirror that had been punched. "Malik, I don't even know if you'll listen to this. I don't blame you if you don't. But I need to say this, and maybe you need to hear it." She took a shaky breath. "You were right. About all of it. About how I took you for granted. About how I piled things on you because I knew you wouldn't say no. And yeah, I told Maya you'd help her. Before I asked you. Because that's what I've always done. I assumed you'd be there to catch what I threw." Her voice broke again. A few seconds of silence passed. I told myself I was being practical. That we were building a future and Maya was part of that. But the truth is, I think I was scared. Of being the only one without it together. Of admitting that even with the degree, the job, the new clothes and smiles, I was still scared. And I leaned on you because it was easier than leaning on myself. I leaned back in the chair, staring out the window as her words spilled through the speaker. Snow had started falling again, thick, slow flakes that blurred the edges of the world. I keep thinking about the night you told me the debt was gone. You looked so proud. And I didn't even smile. I didn't say thank you. I didn't even ask how you felt. I just moved the goalpost. Again. She sniffled, the sound soft and hollow through the speaker. "You were never the problem, Malik." I was. I let the people around me convince me that love meant endless giving from your side and endless receiving from mine. And now you're gone. And I keep checking the door. And it stays closed. Another silence. Then, softer, like it hurt her to say it. "I miss you." The words landed like snow, light but cold. "I miss the way you used to talk to me in your sleep. I miss how you always knew when I was faking a smile. I miss the sound of your keys in the door after a shift. I miss you." She paused again, the silence longer this time. A shift, like she was gathering courage. "I know it's too late. I know I broke something that doesn't come back with apologies. But I had to try. I had to say it. Even if you never call me back. Even if this is the last thing I ever get to say to you." Her voice trembled, then softened to a whisper. "You always saved me, Malik. Please, don't let this be the end." The message ended. The room fell silent again. I sat there, unmoving as the snow thickened outside. The world felt quiet enough to shatter. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I didn't feel triumph or regret. What I felt was something simpler. Clarity. Because love isn't just words said after the damage. It's actions taken before it. And for years, I had done all the action. She only noticed when it stopped. I stared at the screen one last time. My thumb hovered over the replay button, but I didn't press it. Instead, I slid the message into the trash. Not out of spite, but because there was nothing left to respond to. She'd said her piece. And I had mine. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't bitterness. It was peace. Earned. Chosen. I stood from the chair, stretched my arms, and walked outside onto the porch. The snow was thick now. The kind of snow that muffled everything, thoughts, memories, echoes. I looked up into the quiet sky and let the cold air fill my lungs. I was not her savior. I was not her solution. I was not returning. And that voicemail? That was the last time she would speak to the version of me who didn't know his worth. I never replied. Not to the voicemail. Not to the text that followed. Not to the Instagram tags, the sudden flurry of concerned messages from her friends, or the emails with subject lines like "just talk to her" and "closure is important." I didn't need closure. I didn't need explanations. What I needed was air. And finally, after years of suffocating under expectations disguised as love, I had it. I didn't check if the refund from the loan processed. I didn't log into the portal or refresh my bank app like I used to every morning. I didn't care. I knew it had gone through. I could feel it. That money wasn't just digits on a screen. It was weight lifted. Not just financial, but spiritual. I didn't need to see the proof. My chest rising easily with every breath? That was proof enough. Instead, I transferred the money to a new account. One with no ties to Tessa. No joint signatures. No history. Just mine. Then, for the first time in years, I sat down and revisited an old dream. I'd always wanted to build something that lasted. Not just metaphorically, but physically. I'd done HVAC for years, but I'd also studied renewable energy systems in night school before I had to quit to take on extra shifts. My mind had always been sharp. My hands? Even sharper. And now, with that money and the silence, I had room to think. To imagine. I started sketching in my journal, rough outlines of solar panels, battery grids, mobile rigs that could be installed in small homes or cabins off-grid. Montana was full of places like that. People who wanted independence from the system, just like I did. Maybe that's why I came here in the first place. I reached out to a local contractor I'd met at the Lodge Bar 2 nights before. We talked about insulation methods and cold weather design while watching a football game no one really cared about. I called him up and pitched the idea, modular solar kits for people looking to power their homes in remote areas. He said, "Funny timing. I just got a request from a guy building a tiny home 3 towns over. Let me put you in touch." It wasn't a business yet, but it was a beginning. And beginnings didn't scare me anymore. What scared me now was the thought of ever going back to a life where I let someone chip away at me in the name of support. I spent the next week building a prototype on paper first, then with actual parts. The lodge owner let me use an old tool shed out back that hadn't seen action since the 90s. I cleaned it out, brought in a space heater, and got to work. Wiring, soldering, drilling. It felt like breathing through my hands. Each wire I connected was a reminder, I don't owe love to those who weaponize it. Each panel I polished whispered, boundaries aren't cruel. They're sacred. At night, I sat by the fire and wrote in the journal. Day 8. Love is not a transaction. Kindness is not currency. You do not have to bleed to be worthy. There was no fanfare. No motivational music swelling behind me. Just the steady, quiet rhythm of a man reclaiming himself. I thought about Tessa sometimes. Not with anger. Not even with heartbreak anymore. Just perspective. She taught me something. Not through tenderness, but through the absence of it. I used to think that being a good man meant always giving. Always stepping in. Always catching the fall. But good men aren't built to be used up and discarded when their pockets run dry or their patience wears thin. We're not utilities. We're not rescue missions. We're people. And we have limits. She hadn't respected mine. And that wasn't love. That was convenience dressed up in affection. I stopped justifying kindness. I stopped calling it love when it was really just performance for approval I was never going to receive. I stopped wondering if I should have handled things differently. Because the truth was, no matter how I left, it would have never been the right way for her. But it was the right way for me. And that's what mattered now. I woke up each morning to crisp mountain air, the scent of pine, and silence that didn't feel empty, it felt earned. And in that silence, I remembered what I wanted out of this life. Not applause, not praise, not a trophy wife who measured devotion by dollar signs. I wanted peace. I wanted partnership. And above all, I wanted to look in the mirror every morning and not see a man disappearing. Now, I didn't. I saw Malik Rowan, whole, here, and finally free. Weeks passed. The snow melted in patches around the cabin, the frozen creek loosened into a whisper of moving water, and I found myself in rhythm with the quiet. There was no need for alarms anymore. My body woke when it was ready. I split my time between solar panel design work, sketching plans for a proper shop of my own, and hiking trails with names no GPS could pronounce. Each morning, I felt a little more like myself. Or maybe like the version of me I never got to be before I became a full-time fixer, provider, and afterthought. I hadn't thought about Tessa in days. And then the text came. I was standing at the edge of the woods behind the lodge, watching a hawk slice through the sky above the tree line, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. Just one ping. No flood. No barrage of notifications. Just a quiet vibration that felt different, sharper. I pulled the phone out and saw her name. Tessa. A single message. One line. You'll regret leaving me like this. I stared at it for a while. The wind brushed past me, cold and clean. The hawk vanished into the clouds. I felt no anger, no panic, no guilt, just a slow exhale. I looked at the screen again. Her words were heavy with finality, like an ultimatum delivered too late, like a door slammed on an empty room. It was her last move, and she knew it. And it landed with all the weight of a pebble tossed into an ocean I no longer swam in. I didn't reply. I didn't even let the words settle long. I tapped once. Deleted. Gone. That was the final thread. And with it, the last echo of the man who once thought love meant silence, sacrifice, and never saying no. I went back inside, packed my gear into the old army green duffel I'd been living out of. It took less than 10 minutes. Turns out, when your life doesn't revolve around pleasing others, you don't need much to feel whole. A few tools, a notebook, and peace. That was my luggage now. I zipped up the bag, pulled on my boots, and opened the front door. Snow still clung to the edges of the porch, but the path down the trail had thawed into soft earth. The wind had that bite that says winter hasn't fully given up yet, but spring is waiting its turn. I stepped outside, slinging the bag over my shoulder. There were no goodbyes to say, no one to chase after, no one waiting for me to explain myself or clean up the mess of someone else's entitlement. Just the sky, just the trail, just me. I made it halfway down the wooded slope when my phone buzzed again. Not Tessa, not Maya, not even a number I recognized. It was a message request. The preview on the lock screen read, "You don't know me, but I think we have something in common. Her name is Maya." I stopped mid-step. My thumb hovered over the screen. My heart beat slower than it should have been for what that line implied. I opened it. The number was out of state. The message continued. "If you're the Malik Rowan who was married to Tessa, then we really need to talk." I was engaged to Maya, or I thought I was. Until 2 weeks ago, I stood in the woods, frozen, not in fear, not in dread, but in recognition. Somewhere, another man was waking up from the same dream. Maybe Maya had expected his money too. Maybe he had been the next life raft for that family's endless demands. Or maybe he, like me, had finally said, enough, and walked into the storm just to feel the rain for himself. I read the message again, then a third time, and then I smiled. Because healing doesn't always come wrapped in peace and sunsets. Sometimes, it walks in the form of understanding that you weren't crazy, that your exhaustion had roots, that the gaslight wasn't your imagination, it was just their favorite weapon. I didn't know what I'd say to him yet, or if I'd say anything at all, but what I did know, without question, was that I wasn't alone in this story. There were others who had bled quietly for the sake of love, others who finally stood up, others who had learned that saying no isn't weakness, it's survival. I tucked the phone into my jacket and kept walking. Up ahead, the sky opened wide, like the trail didn't just lead out of the woods, but into something bigger. A life. My life. One I didn't have to pay for with pieces of myself. One where I got to choose what love meant, and who got to have it.